Thank you, Nikhil. So, at the very outset, I'll thank AIS and Scientific Committee to give us this opportunity to present this instruction course on advanced diagnostics with ray tracing barometry, how to improve premium oil practice with the applications of iTrace. And we have with us a very learned and distinguished faculty. I am working at uh, Advanced Eye Center PGI, and my colleague Dr. Professor Amit Gupta and Dr. Chintan. They are working in this field for more than last 15 years, and they are going to present the nuances of basics nuances of uh, barometry. The slide is gone. Yeah, and then we have a very experienced uh, this year R.P. Dhanda winner as well as Padam Shri, Professor J.S. Tityal with us also. He has a tremendous experience with the use of this machine. He will be talking about Dr. Chintan and Dr. Amit Gupta will be talking about the basics of the eye trace. So how those basics helps us in premium oil practice. Then we will go on to the individual case scenarios like choosing a monofocal, toric IOL, and multifocal, and how we discuss things with the patient on screen and how we satisfy the patient depending upon main advantage of this ray tracing barometry is we can discuss and show the patient what is happening with their eye. And most important thing is this ray tracing barometry separates the corneal aberration from the lens aberration, and you can tell to the patient and what is happening with the cornea and with the lens. And as we know, all these reflective surgery nowadays are aberration based, so we have to know and discuss with the patient. And so, and we have with us
Arun
Dr.
sir,
Ajay Singh. Yeah,
please share your screen, sir.
okay. Yeah, I'm sharing it. And Dr. Rajesh Sinha, as you know, he is also professor at RP Center. He has, for so many years, the trier of AIOS. He has more than 300 publications. He will be discussing how to optimize multifocal IOL implantation with the use of IOL, this barometry. And then we'll be concluding the IC with a new term like how to decipher dysfunctional lens index and depth of focus. And we have in this session a guest lecture by Dr. Jalal Ahmed on FACO in compromised Lexus. So, Nikhil, can you share the slide now? Nikhil?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, share the slide now.
Yes, just one.
So, okay, can you
Yes, sir.
maximize?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Just 1 second. Yeah.
all right.
Respected panelists, moderator, dear participants, welcoming you all
Karan,
to the talk on FECO in compromised Rexis. Thanks, Scientific Committee and Dr. Partha.
duplicate slide कर देना.
Rexis is most important for completion of FECO. It should be central, circular, appropriate sized, covering
तो पूरा
360
का
degree
पूरा
IOL optic and
desktop.
continuous. It is so important that no Rexis, no FECO. If in doubt,
So you have
continue
start.
FECO in torn. Do not continue FECO in torn Rexis. How frequently it occurs. According to different literature, it varies from 0.79 to 5.5%. However, operative Brexit tear is a reality due to one or more reasons. What to do if Brexit is torn? Do what is best in your hand, and prime target is safety of patients. In torn Brexit, options are closing the eye and refer to a competent surgeon or call an experienced surgeon if available. Do not continue against the odds and ends up with dropped nucleus. Depending on the skill and experience of the surgeon, availability of the correct instruments, OBD and appropriate IOL, we can convert to SICS or ACC, performing supracapsular phaco in iris plane or AC or mixed, or continuing endocapsular phaco. If we decide to continue phaco, certain factors are to be considered, like type of cataract, white, hypermature, intumescent, pediatric cataract, etc., location of the tear, timing of the tear, primary, secondary, or spontaneous, presence or absence of comorbidity like pseudoexfoliation, zonulopathy, etc. In primary tear out, that is before starting hydroprocedure and phaco, take care not to do any maneuver that may extend the tear to a posterior rupture. Phaco and IO maneuver away from the torn area to be done, increased phaco power during sculpting, and decreased fluidic parameters. Avoid AC fluctuation throughout the procedure by injecting dispersive OVD. IOL haptics should be placed 90 degrees away from the area. Here is a video clip showing rhexis extension in subincisional area, and retrieval attempt uh, may not be successful. Uh, I think like that, and another tear is initiated from the opposite side and ends near the initial tear. Viscoelastic was injected. LRI incision was given to correct less than 1 diopter astigmatism. Then viscoelastic is again injected with phaco tip using power. A triangular nuclear fragment from the distal part of the intact capsular area, bag is fashioned, and the nuclear fragments is removed. Viscoelastic is injected in the bare capsule, and also in the adjacent area viscodissection is done. Gentle viscodissection is done, and the nucleus is rotated, and the nuclear fragments are removed by using a vertical chop, and gently the nuclear fragments are removed one after one, and after clearing the nuclear part, viscoelastic is injected using coaxial IA. Cortical cleaning is done, and in the tear area, bimanual IA is used to clean the remnant cortical matter, and the IOL is implanted in the bag. It was a trifocal panoptic IOL, and the haptics are placed in the bag in such a fashion that the haptics are away from the torn area, and viscoelastic is cleared off, the wound hydration is done, and the eye is closed. After 2 weeks, the vision was 6/6 and N5. Here is another video in hypermature white intumescent lens. On attempted rhexis and aspiration of the liquid cortical matter, there was sudden extension of the tear to the periphery. Cortical matter was aspirated, liquid cortical matter was aspirated, and by using phaco tip, the debulking of the nucleus was done, and the nuclear fragment from the intake bag area is removed. Then using a venous scissor, the rhexis is initiated in the distal part, and using a rhexis forceps, the rhexis, I am trying to complete the rhexis in the distal part. It is like a hemorrhexis. Then after completion of the rhexis in the distal part, there was sufficient space, and I inject viscoelastic and then clear the remnant nuclear fragments by using phaco, and then injecting the IOL into the bag, and the IOL is, I am trying to place the IOL in such a way that the haptics of the IOL remain in the intact area of the bag, And after placing the IOL in the bag, then bimanual IOL is used to clear the remnant cortical matter, wound hydration is done, and the eye is closed. Here is another video of hypermature cataract. Here also during rhexis beyond the subincisional area, there was extension of the rhexis, and it seems the rhexis may not be successful. Then another tear is fashioned from the opposite area. It was it ends up to the previous initial torn area, and now with phaco tip, a triangular fragment is fashioned in the distal area of the intact part of the bag, and proper depth and width is done, and the nucleus fragment is emulsified and aspirated through the phaco tip. The nucleus is rotated into the bag, and then it was not a very hard nucleus, so fragmentation and emulsification was easily done using low parameter phaco. And after clearing the nuclear fragments, viscoelastic is injected, and the remnant cortical matter is cleared using coaxial IA. After completing the cortical clearing, viscoelastic is injected and the IOL is implanted in the bag, and the haptics are placed about 90 degrees away from the torn area of the capsule. Wound hydration is done and is closed. Here is a video showing surgeon is trying to complete the rhexis with cystitome, but on injection of the viscoelastic substances, suddenly the cystitome goes behind the equator and touches the posterior capsule. Another surgeon come and gently remove the cystitome from the eye, inject viscoelastic by using micro scissor. He is cutting the floating part of the capsule, and then remove it with capsulorhexis forceps. Then viscoelastic is injected, and phaco is completed using low parameter of the phaco. After removal of the uh, nuclear fragments, it is seen that there is a tear of the posterior capsule by the cystitome. Viscoelastic is injected, and then triamcinolone is injected to stain the vitreous tag, and bimanual anterior vitrectomy is done to remove the vitreous tag and also to clear the cortical matter from the remaining part of the bag. And then a 3-piece IOL was implanted in the sulcus, and after placing the lens in the sulcus, the myotics is injected to constrict the pupil, and the eye was closed normally. Here is another video showing flux. The setting of the femto laser was faulty due to new engineers. And it was overlooked, and during laser application you see that the capsule is shattered into pieces like lens fragments, and trypan blue staining was done, and the surgeon, after injecting viscoelastic with micro scissors, is trying to remove the multiple capsular tags, and by using rhexis forceps is trying to complete the rhexis as much as possible though there is extension of the tear in peripheral areas. As there was femtofragmentation of the lens was done, so it was not difficult to remove the nuclear fragments. Gently, one after one fragment were cleared, and after removing the nuclear fragments, viscoelastic was injected. Using bimanual IA, the cortical cleaning was done, and the IOL was implanted in the bag, and it was possible to maintain the IOL in the bag. Viscoelastic was cleared, wound hydration done, and the eye was closed normally. Here is another video showing the primary rhexis was normal, and there is no problem in the rhexis, and hydrodissection was
Nikhil, how much time left?
done normally, but it was a soft cataract. During removal of the cataract with phaco tip and second instrument, somehow there was
Nikhil,
a
can you hear me?
tear, secondary tear in the rhexis margin. And after removal of the cortical matter, it is seen that right side there was a tear extension, and then the IOL was injected normally in the bag, but it was a toric IOL, so care is taken to place the IOL in the bag, and before final placement, the care is taken to clean the viscoelastics from the anterior chamber, and no attempt is done to remove the viscoelastics from behind the IOL. After removing clearing the viscoelastics, the wound hydration is done and overhydration is avoided. After 1 month, it was seen that the IOL position was 75 degree as it was targeted preoperatively. And in conclusion, I want to say that with proper precaution, appropriate instruments availability, OVD and IOL, phaco is possible in most of the cases in rhexis extension. Thank you all for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Jalal, for your excellent talk on phaco and irregular capsulature in different situations. Now we move on to our first speaker, Professor Amit Gupta. He doesn't need an introduction. No, the first talk is by Dr. Chintan Malhotra. She is our colleague working at Advanced Eye Center. She's going to talk about understanding the basics of Chang analysis, spherical aberration, and angle alpha and kappa, which are so important for the choice of different type of IOL, including the multifocal IOL. Dr. Chintan Singh.
Thank you so much, sir, and thank you for having me in this course. I'll try to be as brief as possible in the interest of time. The talk is about the basic ray tracing and what do we understand by what ray tracing means and what are the advantages that this instrument gives us. So the iTrace is basically a 5-in-1 technology. It's a wavefront aberrometer. It does corneal topography, which is Placido based. It is an auto-diffractor, an auto-keratometer, as well as a pupillometer. Now, the principle of ray tracing is that it uses near-infrared beams at 655 nanometers. 64 beams are projected sequentially 4 times at different locations on the retina for a total of 256 spots. It's important that these beams are projected one after the other and not simultaneously, and each of them is then individualized and analyzed individually so that there is no confusion and it can be imaged even in highly aberrated corneas. The retinal positions of all these rays are mapped, forming a retinal spot diagram, and the wavefront is then reconstructed by plotting the emergent rays. Before we go on to seeing any of the other information, what we should see is the verification display. to see whether the data is reliable or not. So this helps to verify the integrity of the data. And if we see on the top left hand of the screen, we see it's mentioned as 0.1. If greater than 10 points are shown as rejected, it implies that the reliability is questionable and probably the scan should be taken again. The other thing about the retinal spot diagram is that it should not have large areas of discontinuity. In a optically perfect system, all these spots would focus on the macula and hence it would be in a very close cluster. But most eyes have some degree of aberration. So the image on the left shows the retinal spot diagram of an eye with minimal aberrations, but it's still continuous. On the left, we see the retinal spot diagram of a highly aberrated eye, for example, a patient with advanced keratoconus. But we can see that there are no rejected points. So although it's aberrated, but it's reliable data, and perhaps the eye trace is the only machine which can take up data in such aberrated eyes. Then coming to the next, this is the Chang analysis, a screen which all of us use frequently. It can give us at a quick glance a very quick idea of whether a person should be going in for a premium IOL or a toric IOL, and what are the main sources of aberration apart from a lot of other information. I'll take up each of these components one by one. So for example, one part on the left-hand side, we have the aberrations or the which are provided by the total eye. We have the internal and the corneal. And then the corneal aberrations are separated from the total eye aberrations, and that gives us the remaining internal aberrations, which are mainly derived from the lens. And perhaps this ability to separate the corneal from the internal aberrations is what makes the eye trace most useful. For example, in this eye, we see that the internal aberrations mirror the total aberrations, and the corneal aberrations at the lower left hand of the screen are minimal. So that's a general rule in anything. If you see bars, too many bars are bad, no bars are good. Basically, what this means is if you see too many bars, that means there are too many aberrations, and if there are less bars, there are less aberrations. And in this case, since the aberrations are arising mainly from the internal, mainly from the lens, and mimicking, reflecting that of the total eye, so this pathology is, we can say clearly, it's predominantly a lenticular pathology. Digressing from the Chang analysis, just to give this a bit of a clinical perspective. So this image that I have shown, the predominantly lenticular aberrations, this was a patient with bilateral anterior lenticonus, as can be seen clinically as well as on the ASOCT. And he had a preoperative best corrected visual acuity of 636, probably because of the extreme degree of aberrations and the high refractive error. And once we did surgery phaco for the left eye, we can see that the total and the internal aberrations have reduced because of removal of the crystalline lens. The cornea is showing a few bars because the left eye had some astigmatism, which is residual, but otherwise the visual acuity also improved from 6 to 6, and the eye trace tells us that the internal aberrations have gone. The other very useful display, which is an extremely useful tool to demonstrate to the patient what is the source of his problem, would be this visual quality analysis. For example, the panel at the top shows us what the quality of this patient's vision was before surgery, and we can see that most of the aberrations were arising from the internal, and post-surgery, the aberrations have reduced to the minimum, and the quality of vision as well as the quality has improved markedly. So coming back to the Chang analysis, the other information that gives us, the one pointed at the bottom of the screen, is that while using the ASCRS calculator, the value of the atlas rings is sometimes a data point which is to be fed in. And this is given right at the bottom of the screen. And from here, we can acquire these values. The second is the effective refractive power. Sometimes in cases of post-LASIK and post-refractive surgery eyes, this is the value we have to feed into the calculating eyes. And this again is given here. The corneal spherical aberrations, the most important thing for deciding a multifocal IOL is that we don't need a multifocal cornea. The cornea should not be multifocal. And so if we have the corneal aberrations which are more than plus 0.3, then it's best to avoid a premium IOL, which I'm sure will be talked about later by Professor Tityal and the other speakers. Angle alpha is the other parameter which is seen on the Chang analysis. I'm just touching upon these briefly. Now, angle alpha is basically a metric of the how well the IOL will center in the eye. There's another screen in addition to the Chang analysis where you have the angle alpha and kappa are demonstrated. The angle alpha is basically the angle between the visual axis and the center of the limbus or the geometric axis. And this is where the IOL will center. And this is what is important in IOL planning, because if the angle, it's a confidence of a metric of the confidence of putting in multifocal IOLs. If the angle alpha is more than 0.5, it's a large angle. It gives us an idea that the IOL, the center of the IOL will not be at this in line with the line of the visual axis, and the patient may have some symptoms. And if angle alpha is more than 0.5, premium IOLs should usually be avoided, although this limit can be stretched a little bit with the newer IOLs. So just to summarize in brief, the process of planning from a premium IOL using trace, if we have a high angle alpha, we would consider a monofocal option, probably not going for a multifocal. Next, we see if the patient has the corneal aberrations, whether the corneal aberrations are low or high. If the corneal aberrations are high, again consider a monofocal option. If they are low, then we analyze we consider whether this patient is a candidate for a toric IOL. If yes, we can use the iTrace toric planner, and if not, then we can consider the multifocal or a premium IOL. So that was just in brief a little bit about the utility which the iTrace can give us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Chintan, for your excellent talk and finishing well before the time. Any comments? Any of the panelists have? Dr. Tetal, would you like to comment, or we can have discussion at the end?
Yeah, I think they are all interconnected. We can have discussion
okay.
later.
Okay. So now I will invite the next speaker, Professor Amit Gupta. He is going to talk about interpreting multi-zone reflection analysis, modulation transfer function, and point spread function, which is so important for knowing the various signs and symptoms, as well as knowing the quality of vision in the patient. And in many unhappy patients, we have to measure all these parameters. Dr. Amit Gupta.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible.
Yeah. I'll be talking about the multi-zone refraction analysis, the PSF, or the point spread function, and the modulation transfer function using the iTrace. Now, the iTrace actually captures images through two formats. One is the Placido disc, and the other one is by firing the infrared beams into the eye. So what happens is that as these individual beams are going into the eye, hitting the retina and coming back and being analyzed, so this is generating something which is called as the retinal spot diagram. So this retinal spot diagram is critical because it contains all the information that is related to the patient's refraction, aberrations, as well as the point spread function. And the cylinder and sphere obtained through calculations are based on the Zernike's coefficients, and it also has an optometer. So it has a measurement range of plus minus 15 diopters with plus minus 10 diopters of cylinder. And it can measure through a large variation in the pupillary diameter, right from 2.5 to 8 millimeters. It has a very good accuracy of plus minus 0.1 diopters. So to understand refraction using the iTrace, it uses a highly sophisticated system, and we have the ability to fog, auto fog, fixating of the patient, relaxing the accommodation of the patient, and all these they have shown in several studies that the correlation of the manifest refraction versus the iTrace refraction is very, very good, up to the point of less than 0.12 diopters. So as I was saying, we have the settings, and in the settings, we can actually have multiple zones in which we can study the refraction, which leads to the multi-zonal refraction analysis. So how does it help us, knowing the refraction of various zones? It helps us to solve the mystery of day to night vision complaints, and to resolve patients who have post-operative visual dissatisfaction. And it tracks the changes from scotopic to photopic conditions. Just as an example, if you look at this Tracy refraction map, and if it's in red, it indicates automatically that this refraction is abnormal. Green would be normal. And so this patient, as we see, as the pupillary diameter is increasing, the patient is having more myopia. So this is what is leading to the night myopia. And usually this is related to the high degree of spherical aberration in these eyes. we also have the visual simulation charts. So this is through a 5.2 millimeter pupil, and this patient is having a blurred letter, and we can show to the patient, listen, this is the cause of your complaints. At 2 millimeter pupil, it clears up, and the patient has no such symptoms. Now, we know that all 20/20 vision is not equal, and it may not be satisfactory. And point spread function is one of the important things that the eye trace tells us, which helps us to actually, both understand the patient's problem as well as explain to the patient. So the PSF is what a star or lights from distance would look like to a patient. For example, in this example, the patient is having a starburst kind of a pattern, and in this we also have a software which displays it in 3D. So if you see something like the Burj Khalifa, it's good, and that means that the light is being seen as a point in these patients. The Strel ratio is the ratio of the peak focal intensities between the aberrated and ideal point spread functions. So ideally it should be 1. And the point spread function is calculated for both the whole of the eye as well as for the higher order aberrations. Now, what is the importance of that? Importance is the higher order point spread functions cannot be easily corrected, and they may require a customized approach. And they can be used along with visual simulation charts to understand and explain the patient's symptoms. So this is a patient. We see the total eye PSF without spectacles and with spectacles, and we can see how the visual problems have just disappeared simply by the use of spectacles. On the other hand, this patient has a cataract. He has an internal PSF, and only a cataract surgery could actually make the distortion go away. Then coming to the modulation transfer function. So this is a typical modulation transfer function chart. Now, what does it tell us? What do we understand by that? So it is derived from the point spread function. And in very simple terms, it is the ability of the eye to transfer the contrast from the image, from the real image to the retinal, what the patient is seeing. So it's a very, very important unit of visual performance, and it's used to assess the success of IOL surgery, refractive surgery. So it's a modulation ratio. So ratio of the object image contrast to the object contrast. So if you look at this chart closely, we have on one side, on the left side, is the contrast. And on the lower side, on the x-axis, is the spatial frequency. And for simplicity's sake, we take the value of 40% contrast at 10 cycles per degree as the cutoff value to what would make a patient reasonably satisfied with his vision. And although it's a little complicated to understand, but basically if we look at these gratings, so once these gratings are getting closer together, they will start blurring. In very practical terms, if we are somewhere at the beginning with a high contrast of 100%, it would be something like reading a billboard. On the other hand, once we move towards the right, it would be, resemble the amount of effort we take to read a normal writing. And as we go further down, it would be something like reading small labels on those prescription bottles, which are very so difficult to read. This is an example of a patient, and this patient had an internal MTF which was low. The patient had a cataract, and we can see that this MTF is just touching the border of the 40% and 10. This means that this patient probably is not a good candidate for a multifocal IOL. Why? Because we know that multifocal IOLs make the contrast go down. And once we put an IOL, the graph would probably come into the red range, and patient may not be so happy with what we have done. Another example, this is a patient had a cataract and underwent cataract surgery and was pretty happy with the result. A 6'6" patient unhappy with the right eye vision. Once we did the MTF, we could see that in some way that was what was leading to the comparative difference in what the patient was perceiving. It also helps us in making a decision on refractive enhancement. This patient had undergone LASIK surgery, was not happy with his vision, and so we had to take up this patient for an enhancement. And we could see post enhancement how the MTF has improved in this patient along with the tracy. A green tracy means that everything is okay, and we can proceed with treating this patient. So this was the visual simulation chart before treatment and after treatment. Well, thank you very much. And as sir said, we can take questions in the end or now. All right. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Amit, for your excellent talk and explaining and making us understand the value of reflection analysis as well as uh, point spread function along with modulation transfer function. So the next talk is by myself. I'm going to talk about uh, optimizing the choice of monofocal IOLs, aspheric versus non-aspheric. Can you see my slides?
No, you have to share your
Am I-
screen. Your screen.
Not yet,
is-
sir.
Okay. Oh, not
Not
yet?
yet.
Okay, I'll just share it.
Sir, please share screen and then, sir, go on the slideshow. sir.
Okay. Share screen. Okay.
Yes, sir. Now we can see.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. So my talk is basically on how
Slideshow.
slide. Yeah, I've done it. It will come.
Okay, good.
Come. Okay.
Yeah.
So how to optimize the choice of monofocal IOLs? Basically, aspheric versus non-aspheric IOLs. It's not moving forward. Okay, as we all know, in the total eye aberration, we have corneal and internal aberration, and measuring just corneal aberration without lens or total aberration is of questionable value. And aberration can be described quantitatively using these Zernike polynomial, and higher order aberration accounts for around 15 to 20% of total ocular aberration. And the clinically relevant aberrations are coma and spherical aberrations. And the lower aberration, as we know, are defocus and astigmatism in the form of myopia, hyperopia, or astigmatism. And they are correctable in many ways. And they are accountable for 80 to 90% optical defect. And higher order aberration, the commonest ones are secondary astigmatism, coma, and spherical aberration, and they account for 10 to 20% of the optical defects. And as we all know, spherical aberration could be either positive or negative spherical aberration. This cartoon shows the wavefront of a positive and negative spherical aberration. And as we all know, spherical and defocus aberration are the only aberrations of centered optical system, and these are the only two aberrations which has been targeted by aspheric IOL. But of late, even the coma has been targeted by a few IOLs available in the market. And as we all know, spherical aberration in the human eye is in young age is positive corneal spherical aberration, and the young crystalline lens has a negative spherical aberration, which partly compensate for positive spherical aberration of the cornea. And as the age advances, the spherical aberration of the crystalline lens moves to the positive side, and it no longer compensates for the positive spherical aberration, and the quality of vision goes down. It has an additive effect on the corneal aberration. And if we replace that lens, this is in young age, when the negative aberration neutralizes positive spherical aberration, and you get a very sharp vision. And if this is the two eye of the same patient, in one eye we have put a spherical A negative lens, and here is a plain lens, and you can see the point spread function and cell ratio close to 1, and it is very good. And as we all know, spherical aberration affects the quality of vision, and this is how the spherical aberration changes with age. And there are this cartoon shows, or the diagram shows, which different type of IOL with different asphericity. As we know, this has a 0.7, 0.27 micron, this has around 0.2 micron, this is aspheric neutral. And in a post-myopic classic eye, we will like to use a lens with the maximum spherical aberration like a amyotechnics. And in a post-hyperopic eye, we like to use a lens with a negative spherical aberration, which could be a normal non-aspheric lens. And the study has shown that the results of optimal ocular spherical aberration and IOL spherical aberration for 6 millimeter pupil varied widely between eyes, and with defocus of 0 diopter or 0.5 myopia or 0.5 hypermetropia, most eye achieve the best image quality at an ocular spherical aberration of either minus 0.1 to 0, plus 1.1 to plus 0.3, and minus 0.4 to minus 0.2. What does this mean is, if we have a 0 defocus, the best spherical aberration in the lens should be to the tune of this much, or the total spherical aberration in the eye should be this much. If you are aiming for myopia, the corneal spherical aberration should be around this much. And this bar diagram again shows that this is for the Technis lens, which has a 0.27 micron of spherical aberration, and we should be choosing a plano target in these cases. And various studies have shown that customized selection of aspheric IOL based on corneal wavefront is feasible and produces favorable result compared with studies of unselected patient population implanted with aspheric IOL. This slide has already been projected by Dr. Chintan, but here I will add on simple thing. If there is a large angle alpha, we should also avoid a aspheric IOL. Either we should use a aspheric neutral or a non-aspheric IOL, because decentration of aspheric IOL also leads to lot of aberration. Now coming to the example, this is the dysfunctional lens display of the patient. As you can see, the cornea is quite good, and the DLI index, we will come into that in the second arc, is just 0.85, and most of the aberration are internal, and he has a grade 3 opacity, and angle alpha is good. So in this case, and the reflection is not reliable, it is in red zone, it's because of the higher order aberration. You can see internal higher aberration are very high. So this is the Chang analysis showing the same thing, very high internal aberration. And in this case, and the angle alpha very within normal limits. So in this case, the corneal aberration is to the tune of 0.39. So in this case, we like to choose an IOL with the high, like 0.27 micron of asphericity. One can choose any IOL, but with asphericity of maximum negativity. And the modulation transfer function is cornea is good, internal is less. And we did a surgery in this case. You can see the internal aberrations have decreased, and even the corneal spherical aberration remains same, but the total spherical aberration reduces to just 0.07, because it neutralizes the corneal spherical aberration. And this is the quality of vision combined after the surgery. And this is the point spread function, as Dr. Amit Gupta highlighted. It has improved drastically after the surgery. And this is another eye. Here you can see the angle alpha is very high in these cases, though it's a sort of taking the error in the picture. So one should be very careful while taking the shots on the eye trace. So if it is too high, one should be avoiding. I'll just another minute. And this is another patient again here. The DLR internal dysfunctional lens index is almost normal, more than 5, and the opacity is also very less. But the angle alpha is around 0.6. In these cases, one should be avoiding aspheric IOL. Either one should use aspheric neutral or the normal lens. And this is another case with just internal corneal spherical aberration of 0.17. So here you would like to choose no other contraindication, but this the same and alpha angle is high. So here you will again like to choose maybe aspheric balanced design IOL from Hoya, which to some extent negates the coma aberration because of the large angle alpha. This is another patient with 0.34 corneal aberration. So here again we like to choose an angle alpha is good. Here you can choose any type of IOL, as the machine also says. You can choose multifocal, toric, or premium IOL with the high negative asphericity. This one patient with the 0.29 corneal aberration. Here, this is the patient from Dr. Amit's clinic. He has put an eye hans. As you can see, the internal aberration have decreased after the removal of the lens, and the total corneal aberration, total eye aberration also has reduced to minimal, and patient has excellent vision postoperatively. So with this, I'll end my talk, and we will invite the next speaker. Next speaker is uh, uh, Professor Tetyal. He will talk about how we use iTrace in planning the toric IOLs and so solving post-operative problems of IOL rotation. Professor Tetyal.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Arun Jain. First of all, really nice you have included me in this interesting instruction course. Already we had terrific presentations on this beautiful tool for surgeons who are looking for beyond the vision. I think the quality of vision, which is so important now when we talk about the refractive cataract surgery, I think it's not only the surgeon's hand, it is various tools which has given us the concept or reaching up to the quality which is required for a refractive surgery in cataract patient also. This is a review article published in IGO by us. People can go through this, which is very comprehensive on toric IOLs. We all know in our practice, toric IOLs will constitute around 30 to 40% of our cases where you may have corneal toricity of more than one diopter. And now it has also increased the load if you're looking for a multifocal, trifocal lenses. There, even a 0.5 cylinder in the cornea may not be giving a good results. Therefore, you have to look for a toric trifocal or multifocal lenses there also. Interestingly and fortunately, post-op surprises after toric IOL implantation are not that common. And therefore, the results have been quite encouraging, and many people know that toric IOLs are the lens for correcting corneal astigmatism for all patients undergoing cataract surgery. This is nicely explained by Chintan that topographer as well as the wavefront analysis gives you a advantage in toric IOLs in terms of pre-op planning of a lens, as Dr. Arun talked about, intraoperative assessment of your alignment category by Zaldivar caliper, and most importantly, the toric assessment after surgery is the most important application of this iTracy tool. This is what we look for: corneal curvature power, which is given by the topographer, which iTrace has, and the angle alpha, and the internal and the corneal aberrations separately by this iTrace gives you the analysis for a toric calculation of IOL power, axis, and also takes into consideration of your surgical induced astigmatism. You can plan according to your incision, which is maybe superior, inferior, or any other area. Entire calculation can be given by this. This wavefront analysis, Chang analysis are talked about. This is a patient where you can see patient has, if you look at internal aberration wise, patient has a high cylinder. But if you look into the refraction cylinder is concerned is almost nil. But if you see the cornea doesn't have cylinder. Cornea has cylinder of around 3 diopter cylinder in cornea, but refraction cylinder is not there. So this is a patient who had come for a presbyopic lens exchange. We understand the patient would be compensating the corneal cylinder by lens. So this is a patient, if you do a cataract surgery, toric lens is indicated in such patient to take care of a corneal cylinder. Angle alpha was greatly discussed. Larger angle alpha will definitely be a problem for all type of lenses, except for a spherical lens that has to be taken into consideration. Other important thing as separating the total aberration from the corneal aberrations. If you see here, this patient doesn't have a significant corneal aberration. So this is a good case for a toric or a multifocal, which Dr. Rajesh is going to cover. The cornea is healthy, no aberrations. The outcome going to be much better in terms of quality of vision. You look into a point spread function or MTF values will be very good in this patient. So this is a different patient where you can see the cornea is totally aberrated, multiple red and yellow, blue bars, significant RMS values are there. So this patient would require a procedure which takes care of our corneal aberrations. The inbuilt toric calculator, which is there in iTrace, though many people may not be using this in today's generation of various IOL formulas and optical biometry available, because this device doesn't give you axial length. There's a major flaw in this. Otherwise, this gives you all the other parameters. So still, can give you a good toric calculator based on the entire parameter which you can feed here. You can have a current center corneal power, best fit sphere for a conicoid, spherical aberrations, inferior superior axis power difference, all are available here. Apart from that, then you can look into a pre-op astigmatism, internal optical aberrations, entire eye astigmatism, incision size, location, everything gives you a calculation of IOL power and axis implantation also. And you can modify as per the desired residual cylinder and axis. We all know we would desire to have a little bit of, with the rule astigmatism minus cylinder 90° for post-op patients, especially for if you have monofocal lenses to give a little more perception in terms of improving the near vision for these patients. Gel-double caliper also helps in giving you a guide. If you have put mark physically by pen, either bubble marker or a slit-lamp marker, you can take the patient to iTrace, and that will give you a new assessment based on your mark to exactly give you a new axis of toric implantation. So the reference mark by bubble marker, and this is the IOL axis now required to be placed. And gel-double caliper gives you the distance from your initial mark to a new IOL placement mark. So this is a very important tool which can be helpful if you don't have image-guided surgery at your hand. Same thing is explained here. You can enter your pre-op cylinder, axis, incision location, and your SIA, and gives you a new area of concern. And it can also tell you if you shift your incision, what is going to happen. So if you have a 180-degree incision, so this is your area of placement for eyewear. But if you shift your incision superiorly, the IOL placement changes a little bit as per the new calculation by the toric calculator. And I think pre-op wise, it gives you all the aberration profile, suitability for a toric IOLs. And if you can use toric calculator, it gives you a power as well as axis implantation, and also help you in getting a new axis as per your physical mark onto the limbus in these cases. But classically, what we have been doing for last more than a decade now is use this for a post-op assessment for toric IOLs. All patients, premium cases, do undergo iTrace examination as well as pre and post. Post-op, you can see there are various ways to see toric alignment. And most importantly, iTrace will be very helpful because it has a toric enhancement software. This is one of the few studies, maybe first study, where you use iTrace to look into quality of vision after toric IOLs, comparing digital versus manual. And we found that the quality of vision is much better with the digital in terms of MTF values and stress ratio value in these cases. iTrace was used for this study to look into quality of vision. Then misalignment, we know that you can lose the toric power. There can be various ways by which misalignment be there. Classically, it is basically the surgery or a miscalculation of your axis. Accordingly, you can plan to rotate your lens if required. You're required to dilate the pupil post-op, see the marks, and check with your axis in these cases. And I do an iTrace examination, which will tell you the alignment of these lenses. These are pictures. And if you look into wavefront, we are looking for the perpendicularity of the internal astigmatism and the corneal wavefront. If they are perpendicular, patient is happy. If they are not perpendicular, then patient is not happy. So that is very important if you look at wavefront for these patients. Toric enhancement also will tell you how much rotation is required for a particular case. And with that rotation, how much change will occur in a corneal refractive power, actual refractive power, and what will be the post-op residual astigmatism for this patient. That is a great tool to give you analysis here. And same can be checked with the astigmaticfix.com, give you the same results here. Just a few more slides. This is what another case requires a 74-degree rotation, which will give 3 diopter corrections. And you can correct, this was a myopic patient as such. Sometimes you have in IOL master, you have two parameters. One is IOL axis, second is refractive axis, reference axis. So if by mistake, if you put a reference axis, your power will be totally different because reference axis is different and the axis of IOL is different in some cases. So that is what has to be checked. This patient had a 25-degree rotation required, but patient vision was quite okay and patient was satisfied. So this indicates not every patient you need to rotate. It depends on the patient's post-op visual acuity and satisfaction. So I'll just
Sorry to
summarize.
interrupt, sir,
Pre-op,
but
it has a help
could
in
you-
doing a wavefront analysis and alpha calculation. Intra-op gives you axis implantation. Post-op is a one which is very useful to give you a good analysis of a rotation required or no rotation required for your patient immediately or long-term also. Thank you for your kind listening.
Tetial, for your excellent talk on toric IOLs and the use of eye trace in clinical practice. Those are excellent publications with a lot of information.
Arun, you are muted. You can't hear you. You are muted.
So next talk is by Rajesh Sinha. He is going to talk about optimizing multiple focal IOL implantation. What are the take-home points on eye trace to decide when and when not to implant the multifocal IOL? Dr. Rajesh, Professor Rajesh Sinha, please.
Thank you, sir, for the opportunity. And it is a wonderful course wherein a lot of things are to be learned. And I myself listening to all the speakers to add a few points to whatever I understand about the measurements in eye trace. What I'll be talking will be regarding selecting patients for multifocal IOL based on eye trace. There'll be a little bit of overlap in terms of the basics of selection of cases by eye trace, as has been discussed earlier. So for a multifocal lens, the key for success is a good patient selection. That is the most important thing. And that is what we would like to do by use of eye trace. And then, of course, accurate biometry, power calculation, and the surgical technique has to be done. And then, of course, you have to look at the social and occupational factors, like the patient should not be over demanding and shouldn't have unrealistic expectations. And, there shouldn't be occupational light drivers. The astigmatism shouldn't be very high. There shouldn't be any pre-existing ocular pathology or any previous history of refractive surgery, and individuals with a monofocal lens in the other eye also sometimes may be encouraged to have monofocal in this eye as well. And the basic reasons for dissatisfaction with multifocal IOL is IOL misalignment, or residual lens fraction, or posterior capsular opacification, or ocular surface disorder, or there is some deviation between the optical center, what I mentioned as IOL misalignment. So eye trace is a useful tool for patient selection for multifocal IOL, and I'll just go to how it helps. Now, as has been mentioned earlier, that eye trace measures the aberration of the eye, and it not only measures the aberration of the eye, but it dissociates the aberrations of the cornea and the lens. And that is the advantage, that if there is predominant lenticular aberrations, then in that case, you are removing the lens. So you can put multifocal IOL because there's no aberrations left. And if it's a predominantly corneal aberrations, then you cannot put a multifocal IOL because there's so many aberrations. So if there's a relatively high corneal higher order aberrations, as seen in this case, in that case, one should avoid multifocal lens. And if there is a low corneal higher order aberrations, then in that case, you can put multifocal lens. So it is very essential to dissociate between these. As you can see here, the quality of vision because of the lenticular internal aberration is very high. So in this case, once you do a cataract surgery, you can put a multifocal lens because the corneal aberrations are not high, and that way you can improve the outcome. So that is one thing that one should definitely see when you are doing eye trace for multifocal lens. The second thing that one can do is that because of the dissociation of the eye trace of the lenticular and corneal aberration, sometimes what happens that you can see a significant lenticular aberration. There's a little bit of corneal aberration. When you examine the patient, there's no presence of any corneal opacity or any degeneration or dystrophy. So maybe it's an ocular surface disorder. You do a breakup time. If it's low, treat the patient for dry eye, do eye trace later, and you will definitely see a significant improvement in all these cases. And once the dry eye is handled, once the dry eye is treated, then in that case, and the corneal aberrations improve by treating the ocular surface disorder, you can go ahead and put a multifocal lens. Then the third and most important thing is the optical alignment, which is very, very essential in a case of a multifocal lens. Now, there are two entities, angle alpha and kappa, which has been discussed earlier also in previous talks. There are several methods of measuring angle kappa that you can use synoptophore, you can use OpScan, you can use eye trace aberrometry, but angle alpha is measured only by eye trace, and it uses millimeters as measurement unit for angle kappa and alpha. As you can see here, now this red point is the center of the visual axis. This is the corneal center. Corneal center means center of the limbus, and that will be the center of the bag as well. So the IOL centers along the center of the bag. So the center of the IOL will be coinciding with the center of the bag. So this is the center of the IOL. And this is the pupillary center. So the distance, as it is measured in millimeters, so the distance between the center of the visual axis and the corneal center is angle alpha, and the distance between center of the visual axis and pupillary center is angle kappa. Now, angle kappa is important for refractive procedures, cornea-based refractive procedures, because most of the trackers, they track the eye and align the eye based on the pupillary center. And if the visual axis is too much away, then if you do an ablation of the cornea, then there will be induction of aberrations, because your ablation should be centered onto the visual axis. So that is important in corneal refractive procedure. But when we talk about the cataract procedure, the IOL implantation, in that case, the corneal center is important, because the center of the limbus or the corneal center is the key, because the IOL centers at the corneal center. And there should be a great difference between the visual axis and the corneal and the IOL center. So as I said, angle alpha is the difference between the center of the limbus and the visual axis. Angle kappa is the difference between the center of pupil and visual axis. And angle alpha is very important for screening premium IOL patient, because if you have put a diffractive and if it's a high angle alpha, in that case, instead the light refracting from the central part, the central rays will refract from the diffractive plates, and that will induce aberration. As in this picture, if this is the optical axis, now this is the optical axis of the lens, and if this is the visual axis, then the rays are focusing on the diffractive plates, and that's why there will be induction of aberrations. And that is why ray tracing device color codes the amount of angle alpha. And the angle is, if the angle is less than 0.3, it is green. If it is 0.3 to 0.5, it's yellow. And if it's greater than 0.5, it is red. And so that is why if it is more than 0.5 millimeters, then multifocal, it's a big no-no to multifocal. 0.3 to 0.5 is a gray zone, which depends on the type of multifocal that you're using, the type of central optical part, this central optical part, which varies with different IOLs. So this is a gray zone wherein if you have an angle alpha of 0.3 to 0.5, then you have to select the appropriate size of multifocal lens, because the current generation multifocal lenses, some of them have a 1.3 millimeter of the central zone, and in that case, the basic idea is that the IOL should be centered in such a way that the rays, the angle alpha should be half of the central cylinder, central optical cylinder. This is one interesting study which studied on the, I'll just have 2-3 more slides. So this is a very interesting study on the angle alpha in cataract patient population, and they found out this was an analysis on 8773 patients, and it was limited to the first right eye scan of 3382 unique patients. The mean angle alpha amplitude was 0.44, and angle alpha orientation was predominantly horizontal. And so that is why they concluded that angle alpha is a predominantly horizontal phenomenon with the mean expected point of ioncentration 0.44 millimeter temporal to the visual axis. So that is why, as I said, that it is the importance of optical alignment is very high. And this study by Waring et al., they have suggested that multifocal IOL should not be implanted if the preoperative angle alpha is larger than 1/2 of diameter of the central optical region of the multifocal IOL, which I was mentioning earlier. So just a couple of examples, like this is an extremely high angle alpha, as you can see. So it's a poor candidate for multifocal IOL. You can see angle alpha is 0.729. So it is a poor candidate. This is a borderline one. Angle alpha distance is 0.426. So you have to select that specific IOL. So it is a gray area wherein you have to select the IOL. And if the angle alpha is 0.098 here, which is almost coinciding with the visual axis, so it's a good candidate for multifocal IOL. So in conclusion, multifocal IOL implantation is a tricky situation, can be very satisfying, or it can just be reversed. The patient can be very unhappy. So proper planning and case selection is important, and iTrace is a useful tool in planning and case selection for cases of multifocal IOL. Thank you very much once again for your patient listening.
Thank you, Dr. Rajesh, for your excellent talk. Coming to now the last talk on can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the last talk is on how to improve our decision making and how we decipher dysfunctional lens index and depth of focus in various cases based
So just go
on
to slideshow, sir.
eye trace. I've done it. Okay. Okay now?
Yeah.
All right. So what is this dysfunctional lens syndrome? This is a term described by George Beringford way back in 2013, and he divided this into uh, 3 stages. Basically, in stage 1, it is basically akin to presbyopia, where the lens is clear and colorless, but it becomes stiff and the ability to accommodate becomes much less. And stage 2 happens when the lens start turning little yellow. It happens between 50 to 60 years of age, and there is slight blurring of the vision. It affects the vision by affecting first the night vision. That is the first sign of cataract. And the stage 3 is when the visual acuity goes down below 20/25, and it also patient has a obvious cataract and with or without glare, and it involves visual impairment. So what we have, how we can diagnose this dysfunctional lens syndrome on the eye traces, we have a dysfunctional lens index score on the software of eye trace, and it has a scale up to 10. The number 10 means the lens is clear and there is no opacity. Lower number means there is some dysfunctional problem in the lens, which could be based either on higher order aberration within the lens, and it also relates to the contrast sensitivity and the pupil size. So coming to different example, this is the patient display of dysfunctional lens. In this, you can say the corneal, this is a post-LASIK patient, underwent LASIK around 10 years ago. He is around 42, and his cornea is fairly okay, but his internal aberrations are high, and the DLI index is 4.6. Anything more than 5 is usually taken as normal. Less than 5 is taken as maybe a cutoff point for surgical intervention. But if you see the tracy reflection, it is in red. It is not because this is not reliable, and it is because of very high internal aberration. And if we see the lens opacity index, it is just 0.5. So it is the dysfunctional lens index, which is maybe grade 1. And we can show this display to the patient to make him understand, and this may become a candidate for clear lens extension or refractive lens exchange. And this is another patient. Again, here, if you see the opacity grade is 2.5, cornea is okay, quality of vision, but the lens index is 6.61, and the reflection is in green, and it means the whatever dysfunction is there in the lens, it is because of refractive changes, and it doesn't need a surgery as of now. But if patient has some symptoms, then they can undergo surgery. And this is another patient, similar patient. Here the cataract is very minimal, 0.5 grade, and index is also quite high, near normal, and the reflection is in green, but here angle alpha is more. So maybe later in life, we may choose to do not a multifocal. Time and again, we have said the role of angle alpha and kappa, and maybe a aspheric Hoya, or a non-aspheric or aspheric neutral IOL. And this is the same patient with high angle alpha, and you can see hardly any internal and corneal aberration, and the spherical aberration is very low. But as of now, there is no need to do a surgery. And this is another patient. You can see here the cornea also is symmetric bow tie, and the quality of image from the corneal aberration is also not as good, and the internal opacity grade is grade 1, and the dysfunctional lens index is very low. And here angle alpha is in the yellow range, and the tracy refraction is also not very reliable. So we may counsel this patient for the cataract surgery, but we have to explain the corneal aberration to the patient, and we should avoid multifocal IOL in such cases. And this is another case where the DLI is very low, 0.72, and the rate of the opacity is 2.5, and you can see the internal aberrations are also very high. Angle alpha is good, so this is a good candidate for doing any type of IOL or cataract surgery. And it has been shown in various studies that a 10 is a perfect score for a clear lens, and it's 0 in dense cataract. And the DLI, there are other ways of measuring the lens opacity like LOX or classification, or on a pentacam, but the DLI had a stronger correlation with the corrected distance of visual acuity, and it's more sort of dependable for knowing the opacity. This is a very interesting patient. You can see the cornea is good. There's a very minimal opacity, but the internal aberrations are very high, and the reflection, as you see, is not dependable because of the higher order aberration, and the total eye simulation of each chart is very disturbed, and you can see very high coma as well as spherical aberration in the eye, which are mainly internal. And when we went back to the slit lamp examination, you see patient has a lenticonus with minimal opacity. So main cause of his bad vision is lenticonus leading to coma and spherical aberration. And now coming to the measurement of accommodation in this patient, we have this available in this eye trace. We ask the patient first to focus near, then at a distance, and the difference map gives us the amplitude of accommodation in these eye. This can be represented in a 3D map, like this, and this is the for near, for distance, and the difference of two gives us the amplitude of accommodation. And coming to the depth of focus, this is not my slide, I borrowed it from Rosha's talk. This shows amplitude of a, this is a true pseudo accommodation, the difference between the two peaks. Here it is taken by asking the patient to focus for the distance. The blue is for the near and this is for the distance, and this is a true pseudo accommodative lens like a crystal lens, and this is the two peaks. So the patient has a true pseudo accommodation of 2.19, and the available range is to the tune of 3.17. But last two slides, and this is my own patient. She has a very borderline DLI, and the tracer reflection is reliable. She has minimal angle alpha, but she was very miserable. She's sister by profession, working in PGI, so she wanted to get her cataract out. She had this corneal spherical aberration of 0.29, and we could choose any oil. There's no contraindication for doing multifocal. Angle alpha is good, as well as kappa is good, and we put in a SIFI multifocal DOF IOL in this case, and this is the defocus curve which we charted manually. It takes a long time, almost 1 hour, to chart this defocus curve manually by doing it in the optometry department. But iTrace does it in just 2 minutes. We ask the we take the iTrace with the near focus and with the distance focus, and we can see the difference between the two peaks is just 0.5. That is true pseudophakic pseudo combination, but the range of defocus is almost 3.91, which is the this is a pseudo accommodation, which is because of the DOL. So the eye test gives us a quick assessment of defocus range of different IOL, which is very handy. Otherwise, doing it manually becomes a very time-consuming procedure. So with this, I'll conclude my talk, and with this, I think we can throw open the instruction course for any queries or discussion. Dr. Tityal, you will like to start the discussion? Any highlights or any points of discussion? I'd like to ask you one question, like how often you use the Jaldiva tool, or you rely on other methods of intraoperative alignment of this thing?
Not now. I don't use Jaldivar now. This was initially when we didn't have the all these markerless systems. Because iTrace we acquired almost more than now 10 years. So I started toric IOS with iTrace only. I used to do a Jaldivar caliber in those cases. But it was a tough time, you take the patient inside the OR, you mark it, then get the patient to a lab, get that thing done.
Yeah,
but
the
not
flow
now.
patient is affected. Yeah.
I use this only for a pre and post IOL.
Right. So
right?
for
And
post
it gives a
IOL
very
alignment,
nice information. Yeah,
I guess it's also because of most of the lenses, they don't rotate in the post-op period.
Yeah, it's hardly rotates.
Hydrophobic surfaces.
Yeah.
So
it gives you such a nice assessment. Apart from vision, it gives you a quality of vision, which Amit and Chintan talked about, and that is how some of the publications have come. People don't talk about quality; they just talk about vision only. So once we talk about quality, then it really gives you analysis. Quality can be changed by 1 degree also.
Yeah.
Sir, I had a couple of patients, and it's such a good tool to assess whether the IOL is misaligned and what is going to happen actually when we correct it. And sometimes, sir, my question is that it may not match with our assessment. Like I had a case of toric IOL, and it got misaligned. I was trying to align it, and there was a PC rent. So the patient was from far away, went off. So when we tried to align it to the original axis, which was planned in the surgery, it showed the eye trace showed a different axis actually. So I went with the eye trace and it actually corrected the patient to plano.
Actually, I just want to put a few points because I have to go.
Yeah.
One, when you're looking for a MTF values, it has to be, there's an option, uncorrected and corrected area. So it should always do in a corrected way because that will give you the final MTF value. And sometimes we miss that. That is one important point. Other important point is, as I said, these devices will give you anything sometimes, but patient's own acceptance is also very important. Post-op, if patient is happy with whatever vision patient has, the eye trace may show you that 12-degree rotation is required. But patient is happy, they don't do anything, wait and watch. But if, so there are some patients like a multifocal toric, even a 7-degree rotation patient is very unhappy. So those cases you have to reassess and take the patient for rotation post-op in these cases. And as Amit said, rotation does help in all these cases. And if you look into post-op refraction wise, if patient has spherocylinder or a cylinder is a higher in significant amount, so these cases rotation will definitely help. The patient who has more of a spare and very light cylinder, rotation is not required. It is the miscalculation of IOL power which has to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Tetyal. Dr.
I have
Chintan,
some work to do. Please excuse me.
yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Tetyal, for your time and excellent talk. Yeah, Dr. Chintan, you want to make some comments?
I think so. Everything has been covered mostly, and
Yeah.
I just wanted to know one thing.
Yeah.
Like we have done a study comparing two types of phakic implants, and I had given a thesis to one of my residents. It has been accepted also for publication. What I found out was that on MTF, there was a significant difference. But and MTF is also a tool to give you the value of contrast, right? But on these pelliropsins and fact charts, there was no difference. So maybe MTF detected by eye trace provides you even a subtle change or even the finest change difference. I'm not sure. Maybe Amit, if you could like to comment on that.
Yeah, I think Rajesh, I think and a couple of theses that we carried out, I think you might have been the evaluator for those. One was SMILE versus LASIK, and the other one was topography guided LASIK versus wavefront optimized. And in both of them, we had a very surprising outcome that the MTF improved considerably, while the contrast, which we checked using the visual function analyzer, it didn't. And I really do not know why this is happening. It's a very valid question that you're asking, and I really don't have an answer for this.
What I felt was that I didn't have
maybe it is the way we are.
But what I felt was this only, that maybe the measurement that we do on fact charts, etc., there is some degree of subjectivity in terms of illumination of the room, etc., and all those things, which is very essential to tool to provide you the correct contrast. And
also the patient's understanding probably of how to do that test. The patient's understanding, sometimes you don't understand the fact and don't respond as well, maybe, whereas in the eye trace you don't have to, the patient doesn't have to do anything. So
yeah, and that's why I thought that it would be interesting to compare, like I'm doing this defocus study on MTF versus doing it by refractive modality. So it will be good to compare the MTF versus the contrast values of pelliropsin or fact charts, and how they correlate with what is the difference, whether they correlate or not. I mean, these are certain things which are yet unanswered. And I'm not aware of any study which has done
what is more physiological outcome? The more physiological measure of contrast, I guess, would be pelliropsin or maybe the visual function analyzer, because that is done under those physiological conditions where actually the patient is seeing the gratings. And
absolutely.
the MTF is a derivation actually.
Absolutely.
And what issue the derivation is acting, I think we need further studies on that. I think it's going to be a very interesting study, Rajesh.
So yeah, excellent discussion. 2 points I might like to make again. Like in DLI, sometime post-operatively the patient comes and you do a eye trace and the DLI index is high, and but you don't see anything in IOL or in cornea, and sometime it could be just a posterior capsular opacification, mild one, which sometimes gets missed by routine examination. And another thing is centering of toric IOL. Some people say is not important, but it is important, especially if it is against the rule astigmatism, because here you are putting a plus cylinder IOL with axis in the horizontal and the power is vertical. In these cases, if there is a deviation of the sort of a decentration of the lens, which is more common in horizontal axis, that will affect the vision. So especially when there is a against the rule astigmatism you are correcting, we have to again very careful of centration of especially high toric IOL. So with this, I think we have come to the end of time is finished. I thank all the speakers for sparing their time and joining this for their excellent talk and sparing time to join this section course. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.